Aodhan, thanks for joining us, man. It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We were just together, actually, I guess back in February at the Worship Together conference. And man, life was a little bit different then than it is right now. We're talking in, this is, March, toward the end of March, and we're right in the middle of the COVID outbreak. And so, man, how the world has changed in a couple of months, huh?
I know, it's crazy. I mean, there was no social distance, and and it was real life. We were talking in real life. None of this.
Man, talk about, like, obviously the virus thing is affecting everybody. I know it's affected you guys as a band, and just share a little bit, like, how's the church doing, and how has programming shifted around just the quarantine and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, everything's changed. I feel like that's the same for everyone in every industry. I think things are just flipped upside down. I think for us as a band, every tour that we had planned this year is postponed or cancelled, which is, I guess, pretty standard for everybody at the moment. But I think in terms of church, I think it's actually forced church to find new ways to connect with people, and I think using some of those online platforms that we've had but we've never really taken advantage of, I think using them now has become like primary. I think it's the same for every church. And so, during the week, in Australia, we're a little bit behind on the kind of lockdown front. We're just a few weeks probably behind America. So we're still kind of allowed to leave. It's getting stricter and stricter. I think at the moment you can only be outside the house with one other person that's not part of your family.
Wow.
But during the week, we've been going to church and filming worship for the Sunday services. And then we'll do like 8 services a week. We'll film them and then have them all ready just in case we all go into lockdown. And then we've got the studios set up at people's houses. So Brian has a film studio in his house. Laura and Peter, our youth pastors, have one. I have one in my house here, which I didn't have before. So I don't know. It's honestly, it's flipping everything upside down and having to change the way we do things.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, totally. Well, back up a little bit. I know that probably people that are listening or watching, I'm sure there's a lot of Young and Free fans that have been following you guys, over the years. But there may be some folks that haven't really heard kind of the story of the band, and maybe give us a little bit, just back up a bit and talk about just the origins of Young and Free. What was going on in church? Why you start this band at the time, and what was your place in that at the moment in the youth ministry when all of this started?
Yeah. Well, so Young and Free started around 2012, and it started as, a youth band. And the reason it started is because for many years, I guess worship has been such a major part of our church, from, the entire church to our youth ministry. We've always had an expression of worship. And for many years, it was United, Hillsong United, which everybody would know. And, it went through the era of Reuben Morgan and, then to Joel. And I think 2012, from about 2009 to 2012-ish, United was out on the road a lot, and they were away from home more than they were at home. And so there was this kind of gap in our youth ministry where we didn't have, this expression of worship that was coming from our youth group, only because I guess the United guys were getting older and were away a lot. And so we kind of, Laura and Peter, who are our youth pastors, and Brian were like, well, why don't we kind of start something new? And at the time I was in university. I just finished high school a year or so, 2 years before. And they were just like, all right, let's, I was just a volunteer at the youth group. I was the Connect group leader. And amongst everybody else, it was in the same position. A few of the other guys still in high school. And Laura and Peter just put out the call to start writing songs. And to, if you have a new song that you want to sing on a Friday night at youth group, try and do it. And so a bunch of us just did that. And it kind of just all naturally snowballed into Young and Free over those couple of months in 2012. But yeah, it was interesting because it was none of us had plans to do anything like this. We kind of always figured, oh yeah, I'll always serve in church, but never in that way.
Yeah. I thought it was really cool. I remember when we first began to hear music from Young and Free, and Pastor Brian was so excited about what was happening. He was a huge champion and still is,
Yeah.
the band. Talk about that a little bit, how important that's been for the band. I mean, obviously, you're coming up out of a church. A lot of times, what we find is, the youth church life is very separated from maybe the main adult church life. And a lot of times it's like, I don't really know what goes on in the youth. I'm just trusting the leaders there to take care of everything. But it was different. It was different at Hillsong in that Pastor Brian, Pastor Bobby, all the leadership really embraced this movement of young people within the church and the sound and everything that was being created. And talk about that, how important that was early on for you guys as you were establishing.
Yeah, I mean, that was so important. I think we grew up thinking, I mean, especially youth group, when we started Young and Free, we kind of were thinking at the time, oh man, this feels too left of field, And I remember when we had the song Alive, I remember thinking, and amongst all of us going, we would never sing this in Sunday church. You would never sing it. And I remember, there are other leaders and stuff that would say the same thing. They're like, nah, it feels too much like a club, And so there was always this kind of thought that this isn't going to work in that way. And it was Brian who was like, pushed it, into church and was like, all right, we're going to sing this on Sunday. And, that was so shocking at the time, because it was, none of us were like, oh, wow, okay. Because even for me, that was uncomfortable, And so having Brian, I feel like, believe in it and champion it was everything, And I think it put value on, everything that youth group was doing as a whole. And then, especially us as writers and as worship leaders, I think it made us go, oh, okay, we have a place, in the church, not just in youth group. And that was really important.
Yeah. Was it surprising to you all as the first music was released? I mean, there were songs on that first album like Alive and Wake and Sinking Deep. Was it a bit of a surprise that the church at large embraced and brought those songs in as quickly and widespread as they did?
Yeah, definitely. I think I remember being like, I mean, for us in Australia, we're so far away from everything, and I had no understanding of even I guess what the reach of Hillsong was, but I had no idea that people would even listen to the music. I think we all wrote it and all assumed that this was for our friends. It's like, for me, I remember thinking about my friends at university, and I'm like, oh, this song's cool. Maybe I can show them this song because, they might enjoy this because they might want to come to church. And I think that's how all of us felt. And so when when people would say to me, oh, we've been singing this at our church, when we travel, I'd be like, it's so weird. And even leaving the country to sing these songs was a huge thing, and I think, it was a shock.
Yeah, I remember one of the first dates that Young and Free did in the Nashville area was a large local church, and when we showed up, like the line, it was just crazy. It was all teenagers, and for those of us that go to see a lot of Christian music shows, it's usually not that way. I mean, Christian music really, there's always some teenagers, young kids there, but there's a lot of, people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s that just love Christian music. This felt like youth group when I came out to see you guys lead worship. And it was so encouraging because I think up until that point, there just wasn't really a sound at that particular time in music that was really appealing to that age group. And it really did reach a generation that maybe within Christian music just didn't have a voice and a sound at that time.
Yeah, oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I remember that night. Was it Smyrna?
Yeah, Smyrna. That's right.
I remember. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, good time.
Talk about the difference. It's interesting because Hillsong obviously has Hillsong United, super established worldwide band, and then Hillsong Worship being this, worldwide expression of the church, and then Young and Free being more of the young and the youth expression. talk about how Young and Free maybe sets apart from those other two entities, and how much do they always, they definitely overlap, because like you'll end up singing on a United song or on a worship song, and then there's personality sort of just the tentacles go everywhere within the Hillsong music circle. But maybe talk about the Young and Free and how you feel like maybe the reach or the audience or what you're portraying maybe is a little bit different than what's happening in those other bands.
Yeah, I think, Young and Free definitely is, first and foremost, I guess, the youth expression. So for us, it's, finding what's in our youth groups around the world, like, the talent and the anointing that is on the young people, and then bringing expression to it. So I think that would be the first thing. And I think, I think we have a bit more in terms of, I guess, creative license to speak into things that young people are dealing with, and then I guess at the end of the day, end of all of that, our goal is to bring young people in through Young and Free to serve the church, and if that looks like Hillsong worship as well, then that could be the case. But I don't know. I think it's hard to sometimes to divvy it up, and I remember, when I realized that was when a couple of years ago, I'd written Heart of God and Touch of Heaven. And I remember being like, okay, Touch of Heaven I want to put on the Young and Free album, and Heart of God I want to put on the Hillsong worship album. And then then Brooke was like, no, it's this way. If I want to use Touch of Heaven, you can use Heart of God. And I remember being like, oh, okay, these things are not that dissimilar. But in the same way, like, I think the overlap is what, I don't know. In a lot of ways, it's confusing even to us. But I do think, like, I noticed a difference. Sonically, obviously, there's a huge difference, and I think that comes from the producers and the people that we're using. And so, yeah, I don't know. I hope that at the end of Young and Free as well, that we were able to actually bring people into the broader church, and if that looks like Hillsong Worship or United, then that would be that as well.
Yeah. The one thing that's really compelling about Young and Free is that it is this blend. I mean, there's songs on this new album, as I've gotten to listen through, that are definitely, your teenagers are, the sounds are so current, they're so pop. It's what you're hearing on pop radio right now, and the messages are very relevant to that generation. But then there's also these songs that I want my church to sing these songs because they're so great and the lyric is so powerful. And talk about the songwriting a little bit and how you guys approach that as a team, and maybe even some of the influences, some of the things you were writing for as you got these very, very different songs on this record.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that. I think we definitely set out for it to be this kind of broad thing, because I look at our Young and Free team and like the depth of, like, I guess, talent, but also just personality is crazy. It's a mixing pot of different people. And so I definitely feel like on this latest album, we've tried to capture all of that, and in the past, I think our writing has been a little bit more limited to a fewer number of people. And so on this particular record, we set out to kind of be probably the most inclusive we've ever been, in terms of, most songs have 3 or more writers on them, some 5, some 6, and there was a few songs that didn't make it that we had like 12 writers on, which was interesting. We had 12 people in a room. But the thing is, they're actually really great songs. It's just that we actually couldn't finish them because none of us could all like get together and do it. But I think that was the goal in this one, was for it to feel just like this big kind of, this big cluster of people. And I think, the influences for it in terms of like why we went that way is, I think on the third album, it felt quite intimate, and it felt quite creative, and we took our time, and it felt like almost not self-indulgent, but very much like insular. And I think we wanted to do the opposite. And I think as well, our youth ministry in Sydney, and I think around the world, although I'm only in Sydney, so I know kind of what's going on there. was crying out for some sort of big celebration and some, live. I don't know. It just needed another stamp of, this is who we are. It's been 7 years or 8 years now since Young and Free started, and I think we actually need to rehash and go, okay, this is what we're doing. And so this album felt like that.
Yeah. Well, and there's songs on there. I mean, like the more pop-leaning songs, I'm thinking like Best Friends, Never Have I Ever. And they're just like, it's like ear candy. Like they're so like just in your head. And then, some of my favorites, like The World Outside Your Window. I mean, the message on that song is just, it's incredible. It just, and then, obviously As I Am and Uncomplicated are like, I mean, these are just church anthems. And I think that's what's really special about what you've managed to put together in one recording is kind of the best of those two things.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, definitely. It feels right. It feels definitely right for our youth group anyway. And I think that's always a great starting point for us.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our staff at Capitol was celebrating the return of the electric guitar on the worship album as well. So it's nice.
It's back.
Yes, it's great. Like there's some a little bit of punk influence on some of those songs.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, it's funny because I remember when we did our first album, they were like, no electric guitar. we were just so anti anything organic, and now it's like we're almost becoming so anti synth. It's so funny how things change.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit about Best Friends. This was really it was the lead track from the album, first single, and it's this was probably the first song we heard as you guys were starting into the recording, and man, we were so blown away, both by the sounds on the song, but also the honesty in the lyric and just what you're talking about. Talk about this song a little bit and like how it's resonated within the church and just, like maybe the thoughts behind writing it, like the voice that you guys gave to your generation of this authenticity. We want things that are real.
Yeah. But I guess you said it. I think the song is definitely like this raw kind of a commentary on what's happening culturally right now, especially for young people. I think there's so much, so much of us hide behind our phone, and we're actually not who we say we are, or we say one thing, act a different way. And I think this was kind of just bringing like opening the door on that. And when we started writing it, it was very, we kind of just went, I guess it's kind of like a punk rebellion song, it kind of feels a little bit like that. And we, intentionally went down that road. But I remember when we were picking the song, it felt too honest and too, I don't know, almost, it just didn't sit right. And I remember being like, okay, this isn't going to work. And all of us felt the same way. It wasn't just me, and so we had the way we organized our songs, we break them up into Dropbox folders. And Best Friends was in a Dropbox folder called Outside of the Box. And everything else is like, it's either up, mid, worship, and we kind of we'd go through things and listening to them by that, like categorizing them. So this was in a box that we were just like, yeah, it's cool, but we probably won't use it. And I remember Laura listening through everything and being like, oh no, I love that song. We're like, okay, yeah, it's a cool song. I just don't know like lyrically how we're going to make that chorus Best Friends work. And so we went on a journey of trying to unwrite a lot of the stuff that was in the lyric, because we're like, oh, it feels too explicit and too, a bit naff. And and so I don't know. I think that, and then I had to get the song approved by Robert and Amanda, who approved our song.
And these are the pastors in your church that all Hillsong music runs through. A few pastors in your church, just for theological accuracy and truth, all of that. Now, what was their response when you said?
Oh my gosh. I was so nervous because I remember the first lyric of the song. It's like, I don't want to be on my phone. I'm like, how can you even, what is this? And I remember just being like, it's just and the Bob Dylan line in there and everything. And I'm like, I don't know. So I'd like set up a meeting. Usually I would just email them and, either call or whatever. But I was like, I set up a meeting. I'm like, can I come over to your house? And they were like, yeah, come over. We'll make you tea. They're English. So they're sweet. But I went over to their house and I had it printed out, and I gave a prelude. I'm like, hey, this song is, I don't know if we'd sing this in church completely, because at this point, all of us still didn't believe that we'd sing this. We were like, this could just be a song on the album that's kind of like an item, you wouldn't sing this in a praise and worship set, and I'm like, it's a commentary on life. It's not really a praise song. And they're like, okay. So I give them the lyric, and they're reading through it. Like, oh yes. Oh, I love that. Bob Dylan. I love that. And I was like, okay, cool. And then they're like, yes, excellent. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, okay, you wouldn't sing this in a worship setting, would you? And I'm like, no, probably not. Because we honestly believed at that time we wouldn't. And yeah, I don't think it's a praise or a worship song. You could use this as an item though. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Anyways, the next day we sing it at youth. Sorry, the story's gone on for ages, but the next day we sing it at youth, and I introduce it, and all of us like, yeah, we're going to do it as an item. So I introduced it. I'm like, hey, we're going to teach you this song. I'm like, but I'm going to need to get a few of you guys up on the stage to help me. So I pull up all these guys that are in the mosh pit, and I get them to turn around and help me teach the crowd. Anyway, after that, it just went off. And I think the young people just honestly resonated with, I guess, what we were saying, the message. And they kept singing it. Then this sounds like an exaggeration, but honestly, for 20-25 minutes. And so then like the MC got up and tried to like move the service on, but they just kept singing it. The whole youth group kept singing it over him during the message. It was like destructive almost. And so after that, they just wanted to sing it all night. And so that was a Friday. On Sunday, I'm at church and I see Robert and Amanda, and I'm like, hey, this song went really well. I'm like, I think I might sing it tonight at church. And they're like, in the praise and worship set. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, okay. And then we did it. And so then from then on, it's been a part of, I guess, what we do. Like, and we call it a call to worship. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's worth noting that you have a mosh pit at your youth group. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know. They live for it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that feels fresh about what you guys are creating, is that it is influenced so much by every day. Like you're all up in with these kids, and you see the struggles. You guys hear the prayer requests. You know what people are dealing with, and you're writing music specifically for those needs, and that's why it feels real, and that's why it feels authentic, and it's resonated so strongly. I'm thankful that you've got good filters there at the church, but they're also vision minded. Maybe God's doing a new thing.
Yeah, I think He is. Yeah, definitely.
Well, man,
they definitely, yeah. Robert and Amanda are so awesome though, because I feel like they always will bring me back, because I feel like I can go places. If they weren't around, I don't know what we'd be saying sometimes. They're great filters.
Yeah. Well, so the second single that's just released, a song called Lord Send Revival. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because this wasn't originally, we were listening to music, wasn't going to be the second single. There were some other songs in contention. And with everything that sort of happened in the world, and, the virus and the quarantine, and man, this song so powerfully just speaks to, ministers to that whole situation in such an incredible way. Talk about this song a little bit, and the thought of, and why the team decided to just bump that up and let that be the next song that came out before the record releases.
Yeah, definitely. I think this song's kind of been around for a long time. We started it on the United project, Crocker and I, years ago. So it's been around for a while. But I think this song, for us in our youth ministries, meant a lot. And we sung it, in Sydney while the bushfires were going on at our summer camp. When we recorded the album, this song was initially we wrote this song to that end, going, okay, we actually want to see revival in this land, Australia, where the fires were. And I think, when it came to, I think initially we had another song planned to come out at this time, and it just didn't feel right. And I think this song, Lord Send Revival, felt like I guess, the right thing to inject into the world right now. And, that first lyric, I guess, peace like a river, wash over me, is so poignant, because it's like you can't help sing that and not kind of be crying out for it at the same time. It's such a, I don't know, it kind of forces it to be the truth, and I don't know. I think the one thing that's I've learned over this whole period of, I guess, the coronavirus and everything, is that any plan that you make and everybody in the world is the same place, it's like God has other plans, and I think everything can be shaken. And I think, it's hot for everybody. Everyone's year has been flipped upside down. And I think even to the little things like picking a song, like, I mean, we're not talking about major things. We're talking about putting out songs. And, we had a different plan, but God had a different plan. And he, I guess, in a lot of ways is going to use this time now to, restore and bring peace to people. And I know we're just praying that song can help in doing that. And it was interesting, and it's actually quite nice to be flexible when you're releasing things, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just a testimony to the team and the sensitivity for what's happening in the local church, and being able to move something up. And sometimes the spark of revival is affliction, and makes you wonder if God's, he's using all of this tragedy and what's going on in the world to bring about just some great things, and the revival is one of the things that we pray for, but a lot of times it is, revival that comes out of the hardest, moments in history and life. So it'd be really exciting to see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like, I honestly do believe, for the church, this is the greatest time in history, and it's the hardest time, but I do believe, like, if the church can be the church right now, it will be incredible, because there's hardly any distractions. Church is the one thing that's still running online. All the sports are canceled. Everything's slowing down, but the church can actually be the church. And I've had so many stories, like, already, even personal things. Like, I have a friend who hasn't been in church for years, and she's like an incredible person, and she recently messaged me, and she would never do this, being like, hey, I just listened to Lord Center Revival, and like, because I posted about it, and she was like, I've been listening to it all day. I haven't listened to worship music in years. And she's like, I just wanted to let you know that, like, what you guys are doing means so much. And she's the type of girl that would never message that, she hasn't been in church for years, and she's kind of anti it, And so I think there's this strange thing right now where, people are kind of looking for answers. And if the church can be the church, we're going to be there when people need those answers. And I don't know, to me, it's been pretty rewarding to see, I guess, what God's doing already. Yeah.
Man. Well, Aodhan, thanks so much for making the time to sit down and talk with us, talk about this new music, man. I always love chatting with you. And so thank you. And stay safe and well, and send our blessings on to the whole team there at Hillsong.
I will. Thanks for having me.
Well, that's the show this week, folks. Remember, you can find lyrics, charts, and videos for thousands of songs at worshiptogether.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast. You can listen to new and archived episodes of the show wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts. If you like the podcast, you can leave us a rating and review on iTunes, or better yet, email us at podcast@worshiptogether.com. And thanks for tuning in. As always, we hope your church services are incredible this weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you again real soon.